Can you guys hear me okay? All right. If I knew I was coming after Jared, I would have probably switched my spot. How can we follow that? That was just amazing. It was just really, really nice. But I think it also sets us for what I want to talk about, which is technology and how user experience can actually enhance the technology. And there's nothing more complex from a technology perspective in my world right now than autonomous. And so what I want to talk to you about today is how we as designers and as user experience designers can come up with a way to make autonomous, and to me it's a robot car, not be so intimidating to the people that need to be in the car on one end of the spectrum. On the other end, I will also share with you some of the experiences we had when we did our own user research, as well as some other research that AAA recently published, where there is a complete misunderstanding of what the technology itself is. And so there is this mistrust, overtrust, if you might, of some of the technologies, which can also be very dangerous. So we have this really wide spectrum of people that we need to serve, and I think as designers, this is how we can make technology accessible to the common people. And that's what the whole talk is about. I have 15 minutes, so I have tried to keep it pretty high level and leave you with some thoughts at the end of it. This will be kind of how I go. What we are talking about in terms of the challenges. I have one slide about what we are doing as Harman on this topic, as Harman Samsung, and also some of the specific technology enablers to get through this. So one of the key issues with autonomous is we are not getting to the 100% autonomous right away. There are several steps. The level 5 autonomy, for those of you in the audience that are following this space, there are several levels of autonomy, level 1 to level 5. And level 5 is where there is absolutely no human being in the loop in terms of driving or moving the vehicle. And it is only the car that makes all of the decisions to stop, to go, to turn, to change lanes. Everything is only from the vehicle. There is no human interaction at all, and that's level 5. And before we get there, there are several steps in between. There is level 3, level 4, which is where most of the cars that call themselves autonomous today are. Tesla Autopilot is really not a fully autopilot car. It's not, as the name suggests. It's a misnomer. It is a misrepresentation of what the technology can do. And as we get through that, there are several challenges. And what we did at Harman was to actually run a user research. And this is where Jared's talk was so insightful, because he said you can only understand what the limitations are if you actually go and try it yourself. And I think he said 2 hours every 6 weeks. We didn't do that much, but we did do a study where we took novice users, novice people who've never experimented with autonomous or semi-autonomous, and actually try and have them go through this research. Before we get to the details of the research, I will explain to you what the motivation of doing that was. And the primary motivation was this AAA research that came out not too long ago. It was probably about 3 or 4 months ago, And for those of you that don't know these acronyms, sorry, they're all very long, but I will explain them so that you know what it means. BSD is basically blind spot detection. And blind spot detection has been a part of an advanced safety feature of cars for more than a decade. More than a decade. And what it really is, it is watching out for cars that are in the lanes and gives you a signal, whether it's an LED blinking on your mirrors or some other chime or something specific that allows you to know that there is another car and it is not safe to move to the lane that you're trying to move to. 80% of the drivers did not understand the limitations of a blind spot detection system, a technology that has been around for a decade in your cars. 40% of the drivers did not understand the limitation, and actually they did not even understand the difference between a forward collision warning and an automatic emergency braking. A forward collision warning is if you're too close, getting too close to a car that is in front of you, it gives you a warning. And an automatic braking system is it automatically brakes the vehicle if it is in danger. And again, all of these are still level 1, level 2 advanced driver assist systems. 40% of the people in this AAA research believed that the forward collision warning would also automatically brake. That they could believe that they trusted that if I'm getting the warning, which means that it will automatically brake my car as well. And again, forward collision warning and automatic brake have been in your cars for more than a decade. And 25% of the people trusted in a blind spot detection, a few of these other technologies, so much that they stopped actually doing some of the visual checks. They wouldn't cross-verify if the system is failing. They trusted the system 100%. And similarly. And I think this is the core essence of the problem we were trying to address, because this is still level 1, level 2 of autonomous. And here we are adding significantly more complex technology into the car. And we are not giving sufficient information to the driver, to the occupant, where they can make a decision whether the car is doing what it's supposed to do, or is it something that they need to watch for. And our approach, based on a lot of the research that we did, and I will go into that in a little bit, why we came up with what we came up with. So the novice study was very interesting. It was also very dangerous. I would highly not recommend you to do this. And my research, I have a PhD in psychology on my team who conducted this experiment, and she told me she's never going to do it again. And so the Tesla study was, we took folks who had never, and again we did this in Michigan. I can say that in Boston. Hopefully there are no Michiganders here who are going to come after me. They had never driven a Tesla. They had never been in a Tesla. They had never used the autopilot ever before. That was the demographic of people that we picked. And we gave them a 30-minute training. They had to read a manual, and then we quizzed them so that we could get a disclaimer that we've told them all the limitations of the technology. And of course, we made them sign a disclaimer as well. And then they had to drive for 30 minutes in Michigan roads, and they could do surface streets, they could go on the freeway, and they had to engage autopilot as they choose 5 times during that 30 minutes. And at dinner yesterday, I was talking to a few people and recounted some of the interesting stories. But again, that's where we learned about this bookends of people in terms of the trust that they had in the technology. There were folks that would not even consider moving their hands a few inches from the steering wheel, even if the car was driving by itself. And they knew that the car was driving by itself. They were watching it, but they would be just like ready to grab the wheel and, take charge, because they didn't believe that the system was going to do what it was asked to do. Also, again, these guys have never been in a car that is self-driving ever before, right? What was also surprising, there were folks, daredevils, if you might, that instantly trusted the technology. And some instances, for example, if you have driven an autopilot, when you switch it into the autopilot mode, it's just a small indicator on the cluster screen. There is no other feedback that you get that the car is now in this autopilot mode. And some folks didn't spend enough time even verifying whether they actually changed the mode and were ready to do lane changes because they believed that the car was doing what it was supposed to do. There were others that trusted the technology so much, they decided to engage in autopilot in merging traffic, getting onto a freeway. I wouldn't trust my own self to do that properly. Been driving for 20 years. And so some of those things were really, really astounding for discoveries for us, because those are all like really, these are people who 30 minutes ago did not ever use this technology. And so that is the spectrum of folks that we need to serve. The four key issues that came out: trust, I call it TACC, T-A-C-C, trust, mistrust, or overtrust of the technology, awareness, of being able to be aware what the car is doing at all times, collaboration. A lot of the folks felt that they didn't contribute. The car didn't drive like them. The car didn't brake like them. For example, if you've driven in autopilot, the way it brakes is it goes really fast and it brakes right at the end. I don't brake like that. I tap brake and I'm slowly braking, and then I brake. And so a lot of people wanted this collaboration where they wanted the car to optimize its autopilot mode, not as a one-size-fits-all, but can you make it drive like I would drive? Then I have more trust in the vehicle. Can it learn how I drive and then drive like me? And then context of where I am and what I want to do, and do it differently. For example, if it is merging traffic, and if the car feels that it is not something that I should be engaging, then communicate that back in an accurate way to me. And so with that in mind, the TACC was the feedback we got from the novice study. We came up with an overall theme of what the ideal support for an autonomous driver. I gave a 1-hour talk on this topic 2 months ago. I have 15 minutes to cover this whole thing, so I'm not going to get into the details, but there's a lot behind how we came up with this. But these were the 4 themes that we came up with, how we can support an autonomous driving experience for both the bookends and everybody in between. Developing trust, being more transparent in terms of how the information is shared, and humanizing the experience. Yes, it's a robot that is driving you, but what are the different ways that you can humanize this experience for them? And fluid, primarily coming from being able to contextually change its response dynamically based on the specific context. So I will cover in 3 slides what we want to do, and then I'm going to end it with one of the specific technology enablers that we have developed to support this. And I'll be more than happy to answer questions after, and there's a lot more depth in which where this came from, and we more than happy to talk about that as well. So in terms of the technology and being able to showcase to the drivers sufficiently what they have to see, but at the same time not overwhelming them with information. So if you think of an autonomous car, there are several core functions that it does. Perception, being able to look, they have like up to 24 to 27 cameras that is looking all around and watching every minute of what is going on around the car. There is a LiDAR that is detecting, there's radars, there's like so many different kinds of sensors that is constantly absorbing what is going on outside of the vehicle. It would be overwhelming to share all of that information with the driver, with the occupant, but at the same time, there is a sufficient level of information that can be shared that will enable the occupant to develop more trust in the vehicle. And that is, I think, the core object of getting sufficient knowledge, but not overwhelming with technology. At the same time, being able to give multiple cues. So we've come up with this concept of HAV, haptics, audio, visual. So as designers, I think we have now an opportunity of engaging more than a few sensors. And I'm going to go back to Jared's talk where he said, you take the magic band and you go against this thing, and there's a lighting that comes, there's a chime or a music, and there is a specific experience that is developed that gives this individual a very, very unique experience from their magic band. I think with the autonomous also, we have an opportunity here where we can use multiple cues, multiple modalities, not just screens, to enable them to have this knowledge of what the car is doing and what they need to do. And why is this important? Because so far, all of the work that we have done on automotive, all of the UI that we've developed on automotive has focused on minimizing driver distraction. It is focused on this 3-second rule. You can't watch the screen for more than 3 seconds. And we did and there's plenty of this outside, but we did a research as well, and almost all of the UI in automotive is blue and black. You don't see a lot of colors. And Michael mentioned we won a Red Dot Award, and I'd encourage you to go look at that design. It's red, it's yellow, it's bright colors. And we did that on purpose because all automotive design doesn't have to be blue and black. And as we move from this connected car environment to autonomous, that paradigm is shifting from minimizing driver distraction to maximizing driver attention. And we as designers have to now start thinking, what are those other modalities that I need to engage to bring this occupant back and watch what they're doing? One of the, like I said, haptic audio visual, one of the core things in audio, we can do this as Harman because we have the infotainment and the digital cockpit, and we also do the car audio part, is this concept called sonic branding. And automotive does this, other industries do this, where you have a particular chime or a particular music, and you know that that is associated with a specific task. Mobile phones do this a lot. If you're watching a movie and the phone goes off, I'm pretty sure 90% of the time you're able to tell which phone that was which brand of phone that was. Was it an iPhone? Was it a Samsung phone? Just from the ringtone. And so what we are looking at is, can there be ways, because the occupant is not going to be watching the screen at all times, is not going to be paying attention to the screen at all times, is there ways that we can now bring the attention back? And so that's where the multimodal cues in terms of haptics, so a physical feel, audio, visual, would be of core importance. And also, moving it from one mode to another mode, I think that's also where HAV can be important. Also, in this whole idea of collaboration and contextualization, I think it's very important to understand the exact state of where the occupant is, and potentially modifying it or influencing it or changing your response as an autonomous car based on that state. And there is a lot that is being done in terms of watching the occupant or monitoring the occupant, not just monitoring them as what they're doing, their head position and such, but also their emotional state and all of these others. Does that mean that's more data? From our car, probably, but I think it also means a much safer environment for us as well. Also, I think the core part for making autonomous vehicles successful will be acceptance of technology. And for that to happen, we really, as designers, we have the ultimate responsibility in terms of making that technology accessible for users and occupants that either are on either ends of the spectrum. And there is such a thing as having extremely annoying and repeated and overdose of notifications and overdose of information, but at the same time, there is also, if you don't give them sufficient information, they don't know what is going on, then they don't trust the vehicle either. So as a part of this, there is plenty of technology enablers that we're working on, and I wanted to bring these two things specifically up because I think this is where the future for autonomous is going. Somebody spoke about pixel resolution earlier, or larger displays. I think one of the core things, and I alluded to this earlier, which is black and blue screens. One of the core things that we have observed, and we've done user study on as well, is the number of colors and the saturation of the colors on the displays that have a huge impact on how people perceive specific information, as well as how they respond in terms of being able to bring their attention back. And high gamut, or having more number of colors and very saturated colors, is something that is very critical as it comes to safety. Why is that? Number one, representation of colors, amber, difference between the different oranges, ambers, reds, yellows is very critical. Also, more importantly, when you have more deeper saturated colors, you can do overlays. It's called chromostereopsis. When you have deeper saturated colors, specific colors, you can actually create a depth perception in your 2D screen. And being able to do that kind of AR, augmented reality overlays, will be critical when it comes to the future, because a big part of what people want to see is if this is where my car is, and with the 360 surround view, what can we overlay from an information perspective on that screen? And so we showcased this at CES last year, where we had this big quantum dot screen. I'm sure you've heard of QLED TV. If you walk into Costco today, you can buy that, and those have these higher saturated colors. A big part of the reason we did this, the UI like this, it's one screen, It's 128-inch screen, but we actually split it and ran it as two separate displays. And we ran completely different kind of content, colors, everything. And the idea was to show how you can use the display technology to actually enhance the overall experience in itself. And color gamut is a very critical element when it comes to automotive. And I think we have, as designers, now a new technology that we can leverage. This was not there in automotive. It was always focused on pixel resolution, even though, as an engineer, I don't understand why that would make sense for automotive. It made a lot of sense on mobile phones, and I worked at Apple and we shipped a ton of those. It made a lot of sense when you hold a screen that is 10 to 12 centimeters away from you to continue to add more pixels. But when a screen is a foot away from you, there is just a physical limit that the human visual system has. You just can't differentiate between dark and white spaces anymore. So adding more pixels doesn't add any more value, but adding more colors, adding deeper and saturated colors definitely does. And as this group of people, I think we have an opportunity not just to go ahead and design blue and black screens, but something a little bit more than that, that would actually enable, especially as we transition into this autonomous space, a much, much richer user experience. Also, in terms of ergonomics and design, I think we now have an opportunity where we can actually blend and build screens and information, output information into the design of the vehicle itself. And this is where we're also talking about the haptics part, so you can actually have screens and the haptic feedback on door trims, on the mid-console, and a bunch of others. And this is also the reason we won the Red Dot Design Award for the other concept vehicle that we built. So in terms of the core message to this group of people, we are building a lot of technologies right now that is focused on what we were serving, which was the connected car environment. But as we start looking into the future, as we start looking at the autonomous space, whether it's semi-autonomous or fully autonomous, I think it's imperative that this group starts looking at that big change, and that big change in terms of what the need of the end user is. It is not the need the end user had up to this point of time. And that is where, Jared's talk was so great as a starting point, because you could end up being disrupted by the nest if you just focus on what you were doing. You're mature for that particular business, but not for something that is coming way out in the future. And in terms of autonomy, I don't think there's a lot in terms of the technology enablement that needs to happen to make that a reality. But as designers, as user experience people, it is our job to put that technology in the background and to put the experience in the front, because without that, I don't think the adoption of the technology is going to happen. And with that, feel free to come and speak with me. There is plenty more where this came from, and I'll be happy to talk to you about it.